Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the News Brief, and today we're going to be discussing something very significant that has very little to do with the war in Ukraine and a lot to do with Poland. And of course, we're going to discuss it together in the comments, so you don't have to suffer alone, and I don't have to suffer alone. So if you have something to say, please don't hesitate to do so down below. Let's go. A very significant thing happened yesterday. Many Russian drones, some say up to 10, flew into the Polish airspace. Now, I know that this has happened many times before where loose or stray Russian drones got lost and flew into Polish airspace, or whatever the implications or whatever the explanations NATO has provided for that. They have never really seen it as a threat or as an escalatory action or as anything like that, because really those were just mistakes, or they were said to be mistakes. Now, yesterday, things have changed significantly. The first violation of the airspace was recorded at around 11:30 p.m. CEST on Tuesday evening, with the last one observed at 6:30 a.m. CEST on Wednesday morning. Local police confirmed the debris believed to be from a damaged drone was found in the village of Czosnówka in eastern Poland, close to Poland's border with Belarus. Now, these drones were not stray. They did not come in from Ukraine. They came into Poland straight from Belarus. And Poland triggered Article 4 of the NATO Treaty. Here's what Donald Tusk had to say. The shooting down of drones threatening our security is a success for Polish and NATO forces, which simultaneously changes the political situation. That part is important. We're going to come back to it, and I'm going to explain how this changes the political situation. In this regard, Allied consultations have taken the form of a formal request to activate Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty, he added. His decision was made after the consultation with President Karol Nawrocki. So obviously, all of us in Ukraine kind of did not expect anything to come out of this. We expected NATO to use strong language, Poland to use strong language, and everyone to be condemning Russia's actions, but really not taking any action themselves. So last night, the attack on Ukraine persisted. There were many drones coming into Ukraine. There were lots of casualties. At some point, when drones started flying into Poland, Russia actually landed their air jets that usually, or fighter jets that usually send missiles into Ukraine, and kind of waited. And then those missiles and jets came back on at about 4 a.m. and then missiles started flying, right? Interestingly, because I personally think that they were waiting for a reaction, or they wanted to see a reaction or see what Poland is going to do. Obviously, Polish aviation, along with aviation of other countries, because NATO and alliance, took down Russian drones. Everyone was on higher alert, and now the Polish military is on the highest level of readiness. They call it the highest state of readiness, as in the military in Poland is on full alert. Now, I'm not saying this to fearmonger and say Russia is going to invade Poland tomorrow. This is not what we're doing. We're kind of recapping what has happened, and we are kind of trying to see what has happened, why it has happened, and what the impact and implications of that are. Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty provides for the possibility of joint consultations between NATO allies whenever, in the opinion of any of them, the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened. Now, Article 4 is usually triggered before Article 5. Article 5 also is, so it's not like a unilateral agreement that one of the countries triggers Article 5 and then all of the countries have to participate and do whatever that country asks for. Actually, all of the allies decide for themselves what means they think are necessary when Article 5 is triggered. So it's kind of like ringing the bell and asking your friends for help, and then these friends show up and decide how they can help you and what their what their capabilities are. Now, I'm going to immediately burst the bubble in the myth that Ukraine is waiting for NATO to trigger Article 5. That's not the case. I don't think Article 5 is going to be triggered unless Russia escalates further. But here's why this escalation was done. And again, according to the Polish president, to the Polish prime minister, to absolutely everyone, this was not like it was before, since 2022, when a stray drone flew in from Ukraine to kind of do what they called little provocations. No, these drones flew in straight from Belarus, and they were heading for specific Polish cities. So this was an aimed provocation, and Russia wanted to see what NATO is going to do. In fact, Russia wanted to see that the United States is going to completely not care for Poland or, say, for Baltic states. What they want to see is whether NATO is going to be as eager to protect Eastern Europe and the Baltic states as they would be to protect Western Europe. Also, because we know that Donald Trump believes that Europe in general does not deserve American help, and America is the biggest member of NATO in terms of military power, production capacity, and all of that, even though Europe has stepped up a lot in the past couple of years, especially Poland. But this is a provocation, first, to see their reaction, to see if they're willing to be stepping up for Poland to begin with. And third is they want to make a provocation and see if anyone is going to do anything other than issue strong words of condemnation like they did before. NATO chief Mark Rutte actually said in the early afternoon today of the Wednesday that in their consultations, allies expressed solidarity with Poland and denounced Russia's reckless behavior. He added that a full assessment of what happened is now ongoing and that the alliance will closely monitor the situation along our eastern flank. Our air defenses continually at the ready. Here's the thing. Yes, this is not much, but Article 4 being triggered, as in an official protocol being triggered, is a lot more than we've had before, and it's important. And it is very important that NATO, especially the United States as well, doesn't just let this go and doesn't just sort of issue a stern warning. It's very important that proper protocols are in place, and it is very, very important that they show Russia that Russia is not allowed to do that. Because if they don't do that, Russia is continuously going to keep doing it, and Russia is going to keep pushing boundaries, Russia is going to keep escalating, and Russia is going to do big provocations. And Russia might attack, because why not? It's like people talk about this as in what, Russia is going to roll tanks into Europe? No, but do you want your people dying because Russia sent drones into random villages or random cities? Because they can do that. Why would they do that? Because they don't care. They don't care. They want to show strength. They want to show that they're not afraid of anyone. They want to show that law and order does not mean anything to them. Mark Rutte also said that to Putin, my message is clear. Stop the war in Ukraine. Stop escalating the war, which is now basically mounting on innocent civilians and civilian infrastructure. Now basically mounting. So now that the drones came into Poland, it's now mounting on innocent civilians and infrastructure, which is kind of a funny way to say it. I know what he meant, but all of the civilians in Ukraine didn't matter. But now that the drones are in Poland, anyways. And civilian infrastructure, stop violating Allied airspace and know that we stand ready, that we're vigilant, and that we will defend every inch of NATO territory, Rutte emphasized. And that is actually a lot more than we have ever gotten in terms of, Russian drones flying into Romania, Hungary, into Poland before. But again, they were stray. These were deliberate. And now NATO kind of has no choice but to react. And trust me, for anyone who says, oh, you're warmongering and you want to escalate the war for NATO to react, no. You're going to de-escalate the war by showing Russia that you are very serious and that you are going to take action. Because what everyone in the West has been doing before this happened, and I hope this pattern doesn't continue, is they were showing Russia that they can escalate. And that if they escalate, there's going to be a ton of excuses made as to why NATO shouldn't be responding and as to why NATO shouldn't take action. In an address to the Sejm, the country's parliament, Tusk had earlier stressed that this was the first time since the beginning of Russia's illegal full-scale invasion of Ukraine in early 2022 that its airspace was violated not as a result of mistakes or small Russian provocations, but that the drones flew directly from Belarus. He also said that he had already been in contact with multiple leaders, including those who, quote, see the Russian threat clearly, unquote, Finland, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and the Baltic states. He also spoke to Rutte. NATO assets from Italy, the Netherlands, and Germany were involved in shooting down the Russian drones. It is the first time NATO aircraft have engaged potential threats in Allied airspace. The alliance's supreme headquarters, Allied Powers Europe, SHAPE. That it is in close contact and coordination with Poland and other allies regarding the drones that entered Polish airspace. NATO responded quickly and decisively to the situation, demonstrating the capability and resolve to defend Allied territory. Tusk told the Sejm that 2 F-35s, 2 F-16s, Mi-17 helicopters, Mi-24s, and a Black Hawk were diverted to the operation. And the reason why this is so incredibly important is because, again, They're not just issuing stern warning and saying, oh, this is bad, Russia, don't do it. Or the way that Trump did it, saying, Vladimir, stop. Okay. They're actually saying, listen, if you're going to actually send drones into our territory, we are going to defend every inch of it. We're not going to wait. We're not going to be having talks. We're not going to be having deliberations. We're going to defend it first, and then we're going to talk, which is exactly what they did, because everyone's Air Force was triggered. Everyone was in on helping Poland. There were no discussions. There were no, lengthy protocols of what to do. They took the drones down. Then they talked about it, and then Poland triggered Article 4. And actually, this is a very big deal in terms of a response to Russia and in terms of showing them that, nah, you can't do that. We've allowed you way too much already, but you cannot do that. And I really hope that this type of attitude persists, because I really hope that Europe now sees that they're not safe either. And depending on how they react to Russia's actions in Ukraine and Russia's actions around Ukraine, and Russia's provocations on the territory of Europe in terms of sabotage and propaganda operations, depending on all of that and their reaction to it, Russia is either going to continue or Russia is going to know its place. And this is the time that the world really shows Russia where its place is, and that's at the bottom. French President Emmanuel Macron said he will soon speak with Rutte, describing the incursion of Russian drones into the Polish airspace as simply unacceptable. I condemn it in the strongest terms. I call on Russia to put an end to this reckless escalation. I reiterate to the Polish people and their government our full solidarity. We will not compromise on the security of the allies. But it also shows, right, that while they're hesitant to do things about Ukraine, while they're hesitant to take strong measures, because Ukraine is not a NATO ally officially, it's an allied country, but it's not in NATO, right? They are showing that if you are going to escalate into Europe, this is going to be a very different can of worms, and we're going to be reacting very differently. You expected us to react the same way we do when things happen in Ukraine and deliberate and pontificate and not know whether it's an escalation. That's an escalation. Here, it's an escalation, and we are going to take appropriate measures. That's big. But also, I hope that this situation shows the leaders that dragging their feet in Ukraine, not knowing what to do, not knowing whether they should send troops for peacekeeping, not knowing whether to give us specific weapons, kind of like constantly delaying decisions, all of that leads to the fact that now a NATO territory was under threat and NATO territory was legitimately attacked. And that Russia doesn't care if it's NATO territory or if it isn't. They're out for blood, and they'll get it wherever they want, because for them, it's a fun little thing to do. It's fun to show how little they care. And that's all I have for you for today. Thank you for listening to the brief. And if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, turn on all of your notifications, send this video to a friend, give it a like, and of course, please tell me everything you think about the situation in the comments down below, and I'll make sure to read it and respond to it. See you next time.